stable. Oh yeah, no label. Oh yeah, you know me. I have only a path. I'm lonely, but damn, I'm going to win. Yeah.
Sure. I guess, most people, we go through what they consider to be the hero story of, I guess I grew up in less than humble beginnings. Um, Grew up with a single mom who was on social assistance most of my childhood. Um, for some reason, I was obsessed with sports and athletics, and more so competitiveness, because sports was a very competitive sport thing for me. And I I was kind of a loner. I didn't really get along with people. I definitely didn't get along with teachers or school or any of that kind of stuff. So I was a standout in track. I was a standout in basketball. I was a standout in a bunch of different sports. And if somebody told me that I couldn't do something, I would do it. I remember when I was younger, my mom wasn't really involved in the athletic side of anything, or any of that kind of stuff. So I used to find my way to get rides to the sporting events. I didn't really have a whole lot of support with that stuff. And I don't hold her accountable for any of that stuff, because she couldn't really take care of herself, let alone take on a child. So I dropped out of school in grade 10. So society, I remember hearing, oh, you don't have a grade 12 education, you're not going to amount to anything. You got to have at least a grade 12. You got to go take your GED. And I decided that that just wasn't happening. And I was going to go and pick up the famous career of being a drug dealer on the street. So I was 16 years old and I was dealing drugs on the street, and I've slept in cars and couch surfed. And I tell you, that wasn't really the life for me. Didn't get me a whole lot of anywhere. And by the time I was about 22, I'd been in and out of various different jobs. And my last job actually was drywalling. So I was in the construction industry, and that was basically most of my experience in the work world was drywall, because a friend of mine's dad was a drywaller, and they kind of brought me on, and I was in and out of that. There I was, 22. I moved back home to Vancouver Island, and met up with a girl who had a 4-month-old kid, and I got her pregnant. So I assumed daddy from the 4-month-old. Dad was pretty much out of the picture altogether. So, and then we had another child who ended up being 16 months apart from our first son, Darian. And that was where my career started as a shoe salesman. I decided I would go into retail, of all things, and I got a job at a shoe store. I moved my family and everything, got an assistant manager position, moved to a small little city called Campbell River, and started my life as, what I thought was what I should be doing. And I started as a shoe salesman. I did really, really well, but I was the worst employee in the world. I was hard to deal with. There was no amount of validation. I mean, I would outsell everybody. I would do extremely well. And that whole point of doing that was to show people that I could do it, because I created this story. And I'll go in further to detail down the road, but I created this story in my head that I wasn't good enough. So I showed everybody by competing. And later on in years, I figured out why I ended up loving sports so much, because that was my way of pointing out to everyone that I was good enough. And I was a great employee when it came to making them money, but I was the worst employee when it came to dealing with me on an emotional side, or even giving me any direction. I was not willing to take any direction from anybody. But on the other standpoint, I made them so much money that it was like a conundrum. It was like, oh, do we let this guy go, or do we the money, right? You know what I mean? It was a tale of two tapes, and I knew that. I used that to my advantage with everything. Needless to say, they ended up demoting me, then promoting me to a manager position. And then from there, I guess you would, best way to put it, I became the cleaner. I became the guy that went into stores that were just absolutely doing atrocious, or stores that just came from being just opened up, because anytime you open up a new store in an area, in whatever business, your curve of sales goes way up. It's novelty, it's all that kind of stuff. So it's your following quarter, your following half end of the year, whatever it falls on, that becomes the one that's hard against. And if anyone understands, as management, we're paid proportionately to the volume that we do year over year, quarter after quarter. I was known as the cleaner. I would go in and clean up like atrocious messes or old stores like that. And I had an uncanny ability to sell extremely high-end shoes. So I knew that servicing people, showing people the nicest, highest end quality shoe, the odds are it was going to get them to buy the high-end quality shoe, because it was about an experience and showing them the value of what they had versus the new. Anyways, I went through that. I went through several different companies, in and out. The same story, how I was showing up one way is how I was showing up every way in my life. Complete chaos, and complete chaos even in my relationship. You can imagine I was up and down. I was looking for validation from her, but I was also creating emotional distress as well. More so because I was emotionally distressed myself. Anyways, I ended up going in and out of that many times. And then I think I was about 31. Yeah, I was about 31. Been in and out of many jobs. I've been in cellular sales. I sold robots. Literally, I sold robots to the CIA, the DEA, Border Patrol, and driving down to the border to sell these robots that would go underground, the tunnels, because they would build tunnels underground, and these robots would be remotely operated. So they would crawl underneath with lights and cameras to pan to see if there was people in these tunnels, rather than send humans down there, because they would open up with gunfire, right? So anyways, I did that, and then I ended up having my first peak emotional experience through distress, and I decided that I couldn't deal with my emotions. It was a long-term relationship. It was my first long-term relationship. We had kids involved at this point. I had 3 kids, 2 boys and a daughter, and I didn't know how to deal with my emotion. And this was the first time that I started hearing personal development. And I was like, okay, personal development, how do I fix, what is this? And everyone's telling me how it would change the world. And I was like, okay, sweet, a blue pill. There's a blue pill out there that if I take it, my life's going to change forever. So I decided to go to it, and the course was called Landmark Forums. And the funny thing is, just before I came to Aruba, we were looking through the suitcases, and sure enough, I found my journal from my first time that I ever went to it. And that was May 10th, 2010 was my first journey. So that would have been 33. Yeah. So I was nearly 33 at the time. And there I was. I went to the event, and it would open up my eyes. Like, there's this thing called perception. You mean my world doesn't revolve around my perception? Other people have perceptions as well. And they have thoughts, and their reality might not be the same as my reality. And I remember signing, there was a waiver form that basically asked if I had any mental problems or emotional problems, because you basically sign a waiver that this quite possibly could, unearth something that you might not come back from. I signed off on it, and I went to it, and it was great. I mean, I felt like $1 million. I felt like I was high on cloud 9. I was going to be able to conquer the world, do everything that I ever needed to. I left there on fire. My relationship seemed to be working, and 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, slowly that feeling of being able to conquer the world went down and down and down and down and down. And then I was right back to square one. I went back to doing what I was doing. At this point now, I left the robotics company, went into car sales, and then I got a job with Cam Pages, which was the competitor to the Yellow Pages. And that was, I guess, my first bout with actually making considerable amount of money. I mean, for me, growing up in an environment where there was just like nothing, like back to school was like $100 for everything that I could possibly get. So I didn't know how to manage money either. So it was my first job that I ever made. I made $150,000 a year. And I was like, holy cow, this is crazy. I bought I didn't tell you, in 2008, I actually ended up going bankrupt because of the whole housing market and all that stuff. So I got this job, making 150 grand a year. I'm out of bankruptcy, or it still is on my credit, but I'm out of bankruptcy. So I started assuming all this debt that's high interest now. So I got high interest credit cards. I'm like living like a rock star, what I believe is to be a rock star. I buy a BMW, I do all this stuff, and making what I would be over $10,000 a month for me is like unimaginable. I thought this was like the godsend to me. And what I found is I was still not happy. There was no amount of money. I'd been going from job to job to job, to things, to places, to relationships with people, trying to get this thing called fulfillment. And no matter what I was doing, I was just not being fulfilled with no amount of money. There was no amount of money that I was making out there that was filling this void of constantly wanting something more. And I knew that the Yellow Pages was coming to an end. Personally, I didn't believe in it. I mean, there's this thing called Google. I mean, I didn't remember the last time I ever picked up a Yellow Page to find a business, but there I was trying to sell people full page ads and quarter page ads on stuff that just doesn't work. And this is when they started coming out with online directories for them and so on and so on. So I decided at this point that this wasn't for me, and I was going to become an entrepreneur. So this is when Geoff decided, you know what, I'm going to take everything that I've learned here and I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to become an entrepreneur. So I literally quit $150,000 a year job with no savings, tons of debt, a big nut every single month that I had to pay. And I was like, I'm gonna create a business. So this is when this is when Groupon was like a big thing. And I was like, oh, well, I've got all these contacts with all these businesses because I'm running around, start a Groupon. So there I was. I decided that I was going to start my own daily deals company. And that's exactly what I did. Crash course. I knew nothing about systems, processes, contracts, anything to do with code or websites, nothing. I was an employee for all of my years. I was a sales guy. But I put it all together. I remember I went on like Upwork or something like that, found somebody that was going to create this daily deals website, found a lawyer that was going to create these contracts for me. I found all this stuff, and there I was running around and attempting to make something happen. And I found out very quickly that I had very poor planning. I had very poor processes. And quite honestly, I was losing money. I had borrowed $50,000 from an angel investor. And after about 6 months, I was $50,000 broke on top of all of my debt. So this is where the story kind of takes a twist. At this point, I decided that I was gonna search for something in the online world, because I knew that that's where everything was. And I remember years prior to that, I was working at the cell phone store, and there was this guy that used to come into the cell phone store all the time. He was younger than I was. He was a sales guy. He was working actually at Freedom 55. So I could just imagine how difficult that was. He was a young kid in his 20s trying to build a portfolio in life insurance at Freedom 55. And if anyone knows that, to build a book like that, that is a grind. That is not an easy gig to sell people their death insurance. Anyways, I remember being in the store, and I was the manager at the time, and someone comes over to me and goes, hey, you know, and for all intents and purposes, we'll call him his name Joe. This isn't his real name. But hey, you seen Joe lately? I'm like, no. I'm like, what's going on with Joe? Well, you should go look on Facebook. So sure enough, I go over to the computer at work and I look on Facebook and pop up, and boom, there's Joe. He's in friggin' penthouses in Las Vegas, scrolling through all the pictures, Lambos, traveling around the world, Corvettes, parties, bottle service, everything that, you know, it's like all of a sudden watching an episode of Cribs. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what the hell is this? And then I got word, you know, oh, Joe, he's doing internet marketing. He's going into cafes and he's sending stuff out, and made it sound like it was some like underground hidden thing. So immediately I'm envious as hell. I remember seeing this, and I don't know if you can relate at all of seeing somebody that you used to know who was no different than yourself all of a sudden go from 0 to 100. Instant envy, instant jealousy for myself. So I created this big story in my head that he was ripping people off. This was years ago. And I pretty much brushed it off. Yeah, he's ripping people off. He's doing this. Anyways, so there I was at the end of this daily deals thing, and I wanted online marketing, and I knew about Joe, and Joe was living in these penthouse years before, so I decided to reach out to him. Funniest thing ever. Coincidentally, the exact same time that I was building a daily deals company, what was Joe doing in Vancouver? Building a daily deals company. And he was actually finding it the very same way. He still had the revenue stream of the email marketing. And just so everyone know, Joe was not doing anything shady or anything. He was actually doing affiliate marketing through emails. He had lists and he was sending out offers. Third parties were paying him for every one of his lists that was buying products from him. Anyways, I went over to Vancouver. I met up with Joe. Joe sits there and tells me about what they're doing, gives me a little taste, shows me some fantastic numbers. And I was like, okay, well, this is awesome. So how do I be part of this? And this is my first wake up call with mentorship or pay to play come. He goes, well, you got to pay the Pied Piper. I'm like, okay. And the numbers that they were making were exorbitant. Like this wasn't $10,000 anymore. This is in hundreds, sometimes 100,000, 200,000 in a month, which is crazy. I mean, these are unfathomable numbers. If I ever told people this, they would think it's a lie. But it wasn't. And so there I was. And they came up with a number to me, and I just about jumped out of my seat. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to come up with this? This is awesome. I love what it is, but how am I going to come up with this? So I'd lost $50,000 with the angel investor. And at this point, I was like, well, there's nothing to lose here rather than go back to the same angel investor again. So that's exactly what I did. And that angel investor ended up giving me 5 times the amount of money. And did internet marketing. And my very first year, I surpassed my mentor and teacher and produced almost $1.5 million.
Oh yeah, I'm stable. Oh yeah, no label. Oh yeah, you know me.